Welcome to the channel.
I never thought I'd find myself in this situation. I always considered my marriage with Candy to be solid. At least, that's what I told myself. We were comfortable, things were routine, and we never had any huge arguments. Sure, we had our moments, but who doesn't? It seemed like everything was fine on the surface. That was, until one day I started noticing little things that didn't add up. It began with her being distant, emotionally and physically. She would stay late at work, always with some excuse about deadlines and meetings. I'm not the paranoid type, but something about the way she'd speak on the phone, the way she'd quickly hang up when I entered the room, started getting under my skin. I tried to push it aside, thinking maybe I was overreacting, but the gut feeling wouldn't leave me. It wasn't just that. A few weeks ago, I found a pair of underwear in the laundry that didn't belong to me, or to her, for that matter. It wasn't anything fancy, just some cheap-looking lace panties, but they weren't mine, and Candy definitely didn't wear that kind of stuff. I tried to play it off. Maybe it was some mistake, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time I'd see Candy coming home from work late, or when she'd take longer to respond to my texts, my mind would wander to the worst possible places. So, I decided to start keeping an eye on things. I wasn't sure where this would go, but I had to know that I couldn't just sit there and let my mind spiral. I had to get to the bottom of this, even if it meant facing something I wasn't ready to accept. I went online, started reading everything I could about how to catch a cheater. Sounds crazy, right? But when it's your life, your marriage, you'll do whatever it takes. The first thing I did was talk to a lawyer. I didn't want to jump straight to accusations, but I needed advice on how to handle things legally if it came to that. The lawyer told me to get evidence, concrete proof. Without that, I was just a guy making baseless accusations. So, I started making moves. I hired a private investigator. It felt ridiculous at first, but when I saw his face on that first meeting, I felt like I was finally doing something. He was calm, professional. Told me he'd keep it quiet and gather as much information as needed. He said he'd track her movements and see if there were any red flags. At the same time, I downloaded a tracking app on Candy's phone. I felt guilty about it, but I justified it by telling myself it was just to gather data, nothing more. She had been so distant lately, she wouldn't even notice. I also set up some small recording devices around the house, just in case. I knew it wasn't the most ethical thing to do, but when you feel like you're losing your grip on reality, sometimes you just need something to hold on to. The first few days were quiet. I didn't see anything that stood out, but I was becoming more and more paranoid, like I was looking for problems in every corner. Then one afternoon, I received a text from the investigator. "Got something for you. Can you meet?" My heart skipped a beat. I didn't know whether to feel relief or dread. I met him that night, my stomach churning. He slid a manila folder across the table, and the reality of what I was about to see hit me all at once. I opened it. There were photographs, clear shots of Candy, laughing and holding hands with a man I didn't recognize. My throat went dry. This wasn't some innocent friendship. This was more than I ever expected. I had the proof now, but it didn't make me feel better. It just made everything worse. I couldn't breathe. I stared at the pictures for what felt like hours. Candy, my wife, the woman I trusted, was caught in compromising situations with someone else. It wasn't just a one-time thing either. There were multiple photos, multiple encounters. I felt sick to my stomach. My mind was racing, trying to process it all. The investigator had captured everything. He'd followed them to restaurants, to her office late at night, even to a hotel. He didn't need to say much. The pictures spoke louder than words ever could. And then, there was the kicker. A shot of them kissing in the parking lot. That's when the reality hit me like a brick. This wasn't just flirting. This was an affair. I didn't know what to do next. My mind was a storm of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. I could confront her now. But what would that solve? What if she denied it? Tried to talk her way out of it? I knew Candy well enough to know she was a master at spinning things in her favor. But I had proof. I had evidence. And I wasn't going to back down. The next night, when she came home, everything felt different. She walked in with her usual fake smile, acting like everything was fine. But I wasn't playing the game anymore. I was done pretending. I couldn't wait another second to hear her lies. I couldn't stay silent anymore. Candy, I said, my voice surprisingly calm despite everything I was feeling. We need to talk. She raised an eyebrow, clearly thrown off. About what? She asked, pretending not to know. I didn't hesitate. I pulled the folder from behind my back and slammed it onto the table in front of her. Her eyes flicked to the pictures, and I saw the color drain from her face. She froze. For a moment, she didn't speak. Her usual charm, that manipulative smile, was nowhere to be found. It was just pure shock. I leaned in, my hands clenched at my sides. Explain this. Right now. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She was scrambling, trying to come up with something, anything that would make this all go away. Finally, she mumbled, "It's not what you think, Tim. It's complicated." I couldn't believe it. She was still trying to justify this. Complicated? Really? You've been cheating on me, Candy. You've been seeing someone else behind my back, lying to my face. And you think it's complicated? She looked like she was about to cry, but I wasn't buying it. She always cried when she was caught. Always. It was her go-to move. Tim, please, it's not what you think. I didn't mean for it to happen, but... I cut her off. No, you don't get to do this. You don't get to tell me it wasn't your fault. You made a choice. And I'm done listening to your excuses. For the first time, she was silent. I could see the wheels turning in her head, but there was nothing left to say. There was no way out for her. She had no more lies left to offer. So what now? I asked, barely keeping my voice steady. Do you want to try to salvage this? Or is it over? She swallowed hard. Tim, you've already made your choice, I said, my voice breaking. And now so have I. She started to speak again, but I held up my hand. I need space. I can't do this anymore, Candy. I can't keep pretending that everything's fine when I know the truth. I'm done. And just like that, the woman I thought I knew was gone. I was left standing in a sea of confusion, anger, and hurt. This wasn't just about the affair. It was about everything we'd built. All the years of love, trust, and commitment shattered in an instant. She looked at me one last time, tears welling in her eyes, and then she left the room. I heard the front door slam a few minutes later. I stood there, frozen, trying to catch my breath. I didn't know what was coming next, but I knew one thing for sure. Everything was about to change. The house was eerily quiet after Candy left. I sat there, still processing everything. I hadn't expected it to end like this, but I had no idea what to do next. For days, Candy didn't reach out. I tried calling her, but she ignored me. Then, a week later, I got a text from her. I'm sorry, Tim. I never meant for any of this to happen. I don't know how to fix this, but I want to try. Can we talk? I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Part of me wanted to tear into her, but another part just needed answers. Why did she cheat? Why lie? Instead of texting back, I called my lawyer to discuss divorce options. I knew it was coming, but it still hit hard. I didn't know if I could ever look at her the same way again. Yet, I couldn't shake the part of me that still loved her and wondered if there was any hope. The lawyer explained the process. It was clear I had a strong case, but the thought of actually going through with it made my chest tighten. I had to make a decision. After a few days of wrestling with myself, I replied to Candy's message. I agreed to talk, but only if she was honest. No more lies. I needed answers and closure. It was my turn now. I could barely focus on anything the next few days, just waiting for Candy's response. It felt like I was holding my breath, just waiting for some kind of clarity. When she finally called, my heart was pounding in my chest. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I wasn't going to let her spin any more lies. We met at a coffee shop away from the house, so it wouldn't feel like she could just run off. As soon as she sat down, I could see how much this was affecting her. Her eyes were red, like she hadn't been sleeping, and she looked smaller somehow. But I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. I didn't want any of this to happen. She started, her voice shaky. I didn't let her finish. Then why did it happen, Candy? I asked, my voice sharp. Why did you do it? With him. She hesitated, looking away. It just happened. I never planned for it. I swear. At first, it was just talking. But then things got complicated. Complicated. I scoffed. This isn't some misunderstood conversation. You were having an affair. She looked pained. I never meant for it to go this far. I was confused, Tim. I didn't feel like you were there for me anymore. You were always working, always busy. And I felt alone. I swallowed my anger, trying to keep it in check. So, instead of talking to me, you went to another man? She nodded, tears streaming down her face now. I thought it was just one mistake, but then it kept happening. I never meant to hurt you. I'm sorry. Her apologies felt hollow. You didn't think about me at all, did you? You didn't think about what this would do to us, to our life together. This is more than a mistake, Candy. This is betrayal. I never meant for it to go this far, she repeated, but the words were just empty now. I'm so sorry, Tim. I couldn't do it anymore. My chest was tight, my throat dry. I don't think I can forgive you for this. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. I stood up to leave, the weight of everything finally settling in. As I walked out, I felt a strange sense of relief. The truth was out there, and I no longer had to wonder what had been going on behind my back. But even so, the pain lingered. It wasn't over. Not yet. After that conversation, everything felt different. The air in the house felt heavier, like I was suffocating under the weight of the truth. Candy had apologized, but those words didn't change what had happened. The hurt still sat in my chest like a stone. I didn't hear from her for a few days after our talk. I wasn't sure if she was giving me space or if she just didn't know what to say anymore. Either way, I was done waiting around. I couldn't sit in limbo forever, pretending like things could go back to normal. They couldn't. I started looking into divorce options seriously now. It wasn't easy. I thought about everything we'd built together, all the years we had. But in the end, the trust was gone. It wasn't something I could just forget or move past. Not after everything. I began taking steps to get my life back. I reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with, went out more, tried to focus on work. Little things that made me feel like myself again. The hardest part was coming to terms with the fact that Candy wasn't the person I thought she was. That the life we had built wasn't as solid as I believed. One evening, Candy finally reached out. She texted me, asking if we could talk again. I debated for a long time whether I should respond. Part of me wanted to just block her, erase her from my life. But another part, maybe the part that still wanted some closure, felt like I needed to hear what she had to say. I agreed to meet her the next day. When I saw her again, she looked different. There was no defensiveness in her eyes, no more excuses. She just seemed tired, lost even. And maybe that was the hardest part of all, seeing her like this. She wasn't the confident, manipulative woman I had known. Now she was just human, and that hurt more than anything. I'm sorry, Tim, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I know I messed up. I can't change what I did, but I want you to know I regret it every day. I nodded, unable to speak. I was so tired of hearing the same words. Sorry didn't fix this. I didn't know what came next, but I knew I couldn't keep spinning my wheels. It was time to let go. For both of us. I don't think I can go back, Candy, I finally said. Not after everything. She looked down, tears welling up again, but she didn't try to argue. I know, she whispered. I stood up, feeling the finality of it all. I need to move on. And I think you do too. She didn't say anything else as I walked away. But I knew this was the last time I'd see her. It was over. It hurt. It really did. But I had to face the truth. This chapter was done. And somehow, even in all the pain, I knew it was time to start writing the next one. The days following my final conversation with Candy felt like a blur. It was like I was moving through life in a haze. Everything felt distant, out of focus. I spent a lot of time just trying to get through the motions, but it wasn't easy. I had so many questions running through my head. Was I just blind to the signs all these years? Did I ignore things that should have been obvious? I moved into a temporary apartment to get away from a house. It wasn't much, but it was mine. It gave me space to think. It was a huge change and a painful one. I'd spent so many years with Candy in that house, building a life together. Now I was alone, and the silence was deafening. I didn't reach out to anyone at first. I didn't want to talk about it. I just needed time to figure out who I was without her, to figure out what I wanted moving forward. But of course, life doesn't pause just because your heart's been broken. Work was still there, bills were still there, everything was still there. I had to face it all, even when it felt like too much. One day, I bumped into an old friend from college, Mark, at the coffee shop. We caught up, and I found myself talking more than I expected. I told him everything, how Candy had cheated, how I found out, how I was trying to pick up the pieces. Mark was quiet as he listened, just nodding along, but I could tell he understood. He didn't judge. "You know," he said after a pause, "you're going to be okay. I know it feels like the world's falling apart right now, but this will pass. It might not feel like it now, but you'll get through it. You have to." It was one of the few times someone said something that actually helped. I didn't want to hear, "You'll get over it," from people who hadn't been through it. But Mark wasn't giving me some canned response. He wasn't trying to minimize what I was going through. He was just letting me know that it would hurt for a while, but eventually, it wouldn't hurt as much. I was trying to believe him. It was hard to imagine the pain ever easing, but I had to trust that it would. I spent the next few weeks going through all the legal stuff. It wasn't easy, but I felt like I had to take control of this part of my life, even if it was just paperwork and signatures. Candy didn't fight me on the divorce. In fact, I think she just wanted it to be over too. She never showed up to any of the meetings. No phone calls, no pleading, no "let's work this out" attempts. It was like she knew it was done as much as I did. But even with all that, I couldn't escape the feeling of betrayal. It lingered. It wasn't just about her affair anymore. It was about all the years we'd spent together, the trust that was broken. And no matter what I did to try and move on, that shadow still hung over me. I knew I had to let go of the past, but I didn't know how to. So, I just kept moving forward, one day at a time. It was all I could do. That it's funny how people always tell you time heals all wounds, but nobody tells you how long that time can feel when you're the one hurting. The first few months were a blur. There were days when I'd wake up, feeling like maybe today I could actually start moving on. And then there were days when the weight of everything would hit me all over again. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. The signs I ignored, the conversations we had, the lies I let slide. And I couldn't help but wonder if it would ever stop hurting. I threw myself into work. It was a distraction, and for a while it worked. I focused on projects I had pushed aside during my marriage, and slowly but surely, I started to feel like I was getting back on my feet. I even started going to the gym again, something I hadn't done in years. I was getting stronger physically, but emotionally, I was still a wreck. A few months after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Candy at the grocery store. It was the first time I'd seen her since everything went down, and it hit me harder than I expected. She looked different. Her hair was shorter. She was wearing glasses now, and there was a certain coldness in her eyes. I couldn't read her, but I could tell she wasn't the woman I had once known. We stood there in the aisle, staring at each other for what felt like forever. The awkward silence stretched on. And then, finally, she spoke. "Hi, Tim," she said, her voice soft, almost unsure. I nodded, not sure what to say. It felt strange to be in the same space as her after everything. "Are you okay?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. I wasn't sure how to answer. I wasn't okay, but I was better than I was. "I'm getting there," I said. "You?" She looked away, her expression unreadable. "I don't know. It's been hard. I messed up, Tim. I really regret it." I felt my anger flare up, but I pushed it down. It wasn't worth it anymore. "I'm not sure anything you say could fix this," I said quietly, "but I hope you figure things out." She nodded, and there was this small, almost sad smile on her face. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. For everything." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I knew there was nothing she could say that would change the past. We exchanged a few more words, but it felt like we were talking around the real issue. I was walking away from her, not with anger, but with a sense of finality. I had nothing left to say to her. And for the first time in a long time, I realized that was okay. I wasn't the same person I was when I was with her. I didn't need her approval anymore. I didn't need her apology. What I needed was to move forward. And maybe, just maybe, I was finally starting to. It wasn't a clean break, but it was progress. Each day felt like another step away from the past, even if it didn't always feel that way. And that was all I could do for now, take it one day at a time. After running into Candy, things felt different. It wasn't the confrontation I expected, but I realized it was the closure I needed. I spent the following weeks reflecting, rediscovering parts of myself that had been lost during my marriage. I reconnected with friends and found myself laughing again. It was a small but significant sign that I was slowly coming back to life. I also started therapy. It wasn't easy at first, admitting how hurt I was, but it helped me begin to understand that healing wasn't instant. The pain would be there, but I could manage it, learn to live with it, and eventually let it go. I still had hard days. Memories of Candy would pop up unexpectedly, but I focused on my health, career, and passions. I took up photography, something I'd always wanted to try. It felt good to focus on myself for once, to do things that made me happy. I wasn't ready to date yet. I needed to heal fully before bringing someone new into my life. But slowly, I began to feel more at peace. The anger and bitterness faded. I wasn't perfect, but I was moving forward, and that was enough. And one day, I realized I had let go of the past. The weight of it was gone. I was free. It was a small victory, but one I was proud of. For now, healing was enough that I wasn't looking for anything new, honestly. I was just focused on myself, trying to rebuild my life. But then, as if the universe had a sense of humor, things took an unexpected turn. It happened one night when I ran into Sarah, a friend of mine who had been close to Candy and me during the early years of our marriage. We hadn't really stayed in touch since the divorce, but we had always gotten along well. We bumped into each other at a local bar, and after the initial awkwardness, we started talking. I found myself telling her more than I intended about everything I had gone through. The hurt, the betrayal, the confusion. She listened, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like someone truly understood. "I always knew you two had something special," she said after a long pause. "It's crazy how things ended. But I want you to know, I'm really sorry for everything you've been through." Her words were kind, and they felt real. But it wasn't just her sympathy that struck me. As we continued talking, I realized that I was actually enjoying our conversation. The chemistry between us was unexpected, but undeniable. We hadn't really connected in that way before, but something was different now. Over the next few weeks, we kept in touch. It was casual at first, just catching up over coffee or meeting up for a drink. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was slowly shifting between us. It wasn't about rushing into anything. It was just the realization that I could open up to someone again, that I didn't have to be alone in this world. It was a strange feeling, like I was finally starting to trust again, starting to see the possibility of something new. But I wasn't ready to dive in head first. I still needed time. But just the idea that I could have a future, one that wasn't tied to the past, was something I hadn't allowed myself to believe in for a long time. For now, I was taking it slow, letting things unfold, step by step. I had no idea where it would go, but for the first time in ages, I felt hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. As the weeks passed, I found myself looking forward to the time I spent with Sarah. It was strange, like I was learning how to be around someone without the baggage of my past hanging over me. We'd talk about everything and nothing, but I noticed how easy it felt to be with her. I could laugh without the bitterness, and I could share things without feeling like I was being judged. It wasn't like I was rushing into anything, but the more time I spent with her, the more I realized how much I had missed real connection. Sarah wasn't pushing anything. She just let things happen naturally, and I appreciated that. We spent weekends hiking, grabbing coffee, and having long conversations about life, dreams, and everything in between. There were moments, though, when doubt crept in. Was I just trying to replace Candy? Was I rushing into something because I was tired of being alone? I had to remind myself that this was different. I wasn't just looking for a distraction. I was learning to trust again, and that took time. One evening, after a few months of casually hanging out, Sarah and I were walking through the park when she stopped and looked at me. Her expression was a mix of seriousness and warmth. "Tim, I know things haven't been easy for you, and I don't want to rush you. she said softly. "But I think we're both kind of dancing around this. I like you. A lot. And I think you feel the same way. I just want to know if you're ready for this, whatever this is." It caught me off guard, but it also felt like a relief. There was no pressure, no grand declaration. Just a simple, honest question. I took a deep breath and looked her in the eyes. "I think I am," I said, realizing how true it felt. "I'm not looking to rush anything, but I don't want to shut this down either." Her smile was all the reassurance I needed. We stood there for a moment, just soaking in the moment, before continuing our walk. It was the beginning of something new, something I hadn't expected, but was slowly coming to embrace. It wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about finding the strength to move forward, one step at a time. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the right path. For now, I was taking things slow with Sarah, but I was hopeful. Life was starting to feel like it could be good again today as much as I wanted to focus on the present and the possibility of something new with Sarah. The past had a way of creeping back in. It wasn't that I was hung up on Candy, but sometimes memories would hit me out of nowhere, certain songs, certain places, and I'd feel a wave of emotion I hadn't expected. It was like the past was never completely gone. It was just buried, waiting to resurface. I remember one evening, while Sarah and I were having dinner at a small restaurant, I caught myself zoning out. I could hear her talking, but my mind had drifted back to a time when Candy and I used to come here. It was one of those places we loved, and the memory hit me like a punch in the gut. I excused myself to go to the bathroom, and when I stared at my reflection in the mirror, I saw the wear and tear of the past few years. The heartache, the confusion, it was all there, lingering in my eyes. I hated it. I didn't want it to define me anymore, but I realized it still had a hold on me in ways I wasn't fully aware of. I returned to the table and apologized to Sarah, not wanting to seem distant, but she could tell something was off. "Hey, what's going on?" she asked gently, concern in her voice. I took a deep breath. "Just some stuff from the past. Nothing big. I'm okay." She looked at me, clearly not buying it, but she didn't push. "You don't have to keep it all in, she said. "You can talk to me when you're ready." It meant more than I could put into words. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone in this. It wasn't about replacing Candy or trying to forget the past. It was about healing and moving forward in my own time, with someone who genuinely cared. That night, I realized that the pain from my past was never going to disappear completely. It wasn't something I could just wipe away. But maybe, with time, it would get easier. Maybe I could find a way to let go of the bitterness and hurt, even if it was only a little at a time. I wasn't ready to rush into anything, but I knew I had something real with Sarah, and maybe that was enough for now. Maybe it was enough to just be here, to take it slow, and to let things unfold naturally. The past would always be a part of me, but I didn't have to let it control my future. As I continued spending more time with Sarah, I started to feel something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time: trust. It wasn't easy to open up fully, to let myself be vulnerable again, but with her, it felt different. She was patient and kind, never rushing me or trying to push me past what I was ready for. But there was still a part of me that hesitated, that feared repeating the mistakes of the past. One afternoon, Sarah and I went for a walk in the park. The sun was setting, and everything felt peaceful, like the world had slowed down just for us. We were talking about everything: life, dreams, the future, when Sarah stopped walking and looked at me. "Tim, I know it's been hard for you. I can see it," she said softly. "And I'm not asking you to forget what happened, but I want you to know that I'm here for you. I want to be with you, but I also understand if you need more time." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had spent so much time guarding my heart, keeping it protected from the possibility of being hurt again. And now, here she was, offering me a chance to move forward, to truly let someone in again. But I was scared. "I don't want to hurt you," I said quietly. "I'm afraid of making the same mistakes, of opening up and then getting hurt again." Sarah reached out, taking my hand in hers. "I don't want you to be scared, Tim. I know you've been through a lot, but you don't have to do this alone. We're both here, and we can take it one step at a time." It wasn't an easy thing for me to admit, but I realized that Sarah wasn't asking me to forget the past. She was asking me to move forward, to trust again, not just her, but myself. It was a terrifying thought, but also a freeing one. "I want to try," I said, the words coming out more naturally than I expected. "I'm not perfect, and I don't know where this is going, but I'm willing to give it a shot." Her smile was all the reassurance I needed. She squeezed my hand, and we continued walking, side by side. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving forward, not just with her, but with myself. The fear still lingered, but I realized it wasn't something I could avoid forever. If I wanted to build something new, something real, I had to face that fear and let go of the doubts that had held me back. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to happen overnight, but I was willing to try. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. As time passed, Sarah and I settled into a rhythm. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't always easy, but it felt real. For the first time since everything with Candy, I felt like I could breathe again. It wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about learning how to live with it, how to move forward, and how to build something new from the ground up. I still had moments where I felt vulnerable, where the weight of my past would crash down on me unexpectedly. But Sarah was patient. She didn't try to fix me or rush me. She just let me be, and that alone helped more than I realized. We spent more time together, and little by little, I started feeling like myself again. We didn't dive into anything too serious too fast. It wasn't about rushing. It was about taking it slow, letting it unfold naturally. We made dinner together, spent lazy Sundays watching movies, and went for long walks in the park, just talking about everything and nothing. I also began to notice how much I was enjoying the simple things again. Things I hadn't even realized I'd stopped caring about. Laughing over stupid jokes, cooking a meal together, or even just sitting in comfortable silence. These small moments reminded me of the joy that still existed, even after everything had fallen apart. One night, as we sat on the couch, Sarah turned to me and said, "You know, I really appreciate how patient you've been with all of this. I know it's not easy for you." I looked at her, surprised by how much I'd let myself care. It's not easy, but it feels right. And I think, for the first time in a long time, I'm ready to see where this goes. She smiled and leaned in to kiss me. It wasn't some grand gesture. It was just a simple, soft kiss, but it meant everything in that moment. It felt like a promise, one to take things slowly, to build trust, and to keep moving forward together. As we sat there, side by side, I realized how far I'd come. I had gone from feeling completely lost to finding a new kind of normal. I wasn't healed yet. I didn't think I ever would be fully, but I was learning how to be okay with that. I was learning how to let go of the past, how to forgive myself, and how to embrace the future. Maybe it wasn't perfect. Maybe I would always carry some scars from the past, but I wasn't letting it control me anymore. I was choosing to move forward, and that felt like the most important step I could take. With Sarah by my side, I wasn't so afraid of what the future held anymore. I was ready to face it. One day at a time, as the months went by, Sarah and I grew closer. It wasn't something I had expected, but in a way, it was exactly what I needed. We weren't rushing to define things, but there was a quiet understanding between us that felt different from anything I'd experienced before. She didn't try to fix me, but she brought out the best parts of me, and I began to realize how much I had been holding back, how much I had let my past control me. One evening, we were sitting on her balcony, looking out at the city. The sky was painted with the soft colors of sunset, and it felt like everything had finally found its place. Sarah turned to me, her eyes soft, her voice serious, but full of warmth. "Tim, I know you're still healing. I know it hasn't been easy, and I don't expect you to have all the answers right now. But I want you to know I'm here. I'm here for the journey, whatever it is." I looked at her, feeling a mix of gratitude and relief. It was exactly what I needed to hear. Someone who didn't expect perfection, someone who was willing to walk with me, even when things were hard. "I'm not perfect, Sarah. I still have a lot of stuff to figure out," I said, my voice honest. "But with you, I feel like I'm on the right path. I'm ready to see where this goes, to build something real." She smiled, her eyes glinting with understanding. "That's all I'm asking for. One step at a time." In that moment, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I wasn't carrying the burden of my past as much as I had been. I wasn't running from it, but I was choosing not to let it dictate my future. I was choosing to embrace what was right in front of me, the possibility of something new, with Sarah. The pain of the past wasn't gone. It would always be a part of me, but it didn't control me anymore. It was just part of my story, one chapter, but not the whole book. I had learned to let go, to trust again, and to give myself the grace to move forward. And maybe that was enough. For now, I was content. I didn't know what the future would bring, but I knew I wasn't alone in facing it. Sarah and I were writing our own story, one day at a time, and that felt like a future worth looking forward to. So I took her hand, looked at her with a smile, and said, "Let's see where this goes." And for the first time in a long time, I was excited about the answer.
Goodbye.